I was a math undergrad coming out of Stanford. I was actually not very employable. Sometimes I think about that, what my life would have been like if I had lots of job prospects becoming an entrepreneur. It didn't seem that risky. I wasn't leaving something massive behind.
Amazing to have you here.
It's great to be here.
I wanted to touch on a few topics today. One is the journey you've traveled all the way to here. The second one is your learnings, sort of messages that are really profound and universal for other founders. So maybe we just kick off with that. The first question, your journey from Eastern Europe, from Bulgaria. What is at the core of your identity and belief system and motivation that you've retained and that has really carried you on that journey?
Figuring out like my occupation as an entrepreneur, that came to me relatively late in life. When I went to Stanford as an undergrad, I didn't really have the intention of being an entrepreneur. I didn't really see entrepreneurship around me growing up. My dad had a small business in Bulgaria, but that was sort of like, I was too young to remember. He ran a small tourism company where they would take French tourists around the Bulgarian attractions, and he kind of grew that business. But growing that business was like buying another bus. It wasn't like a technology business. And then when I moved to the US, I was on the East Coast in Northern Virginia, which, you had the dot-com infrastructure boom and America Online was there. But other than that, there wasn't really too much entrepreneurship that I was connected to. Growing up, I'd say my childhood was really driven by the pressure that I felt as the only child, and that my family felt of like making it into this new country. My parents immigrated with basically no money to their name. I mean, I still remember seeing the photo album of my dad when he got his first paycheck in the US. Somehow he had gotten coins and he had like dumped the coins and a few bills on the bed, and he was just like so proud to get some money in this new country in the local currency that we took one out of 32 pictures on the camera roll was like dedicated to this. I knew that I had to do well in school because the college was not certain. I had to probably get a scholarship.
That's very inspirational, and clearly the pursuit of excellence and kind of having to make it is at the core of it. What was the transition moment to actually leave academia, go and start a company?
I found out that I was good at mathematics and physics pretty early on, and I kind of continued taking more and more challenging math classes and kind of challenging myself academically and doing well in school, all the way through to grad school to a math PhD. I met my future co-founder and great friend Beju Bhatt, who was also a physics major who transitioned to math in undergrad. We met at Stanford, and we noticed we had some similarities. We were both immigrants, or children of immigrants in his case. Both grew up in Virginia, although I was Northern and he was Southern, and both only children. So kind of like similar pressures. Yeah, similar pressures, similar upbringings. And, we both had like childhoods where much was expected of us. And we both like to challenge ourselves by taking these very difficult graduate level classes that you would get no credit for, either from the school, from your peers, or from prospective employers.
So you went the extra mile.
When I got to grad school, I went to get a math PhD at UCLA. I think it kind of dawned on me that this was a career, and the study of math and kind of like these advanced subjects, while interesting, was not the career that I wanted. Someone gave me this gift, which was a book. It was called The Mathematician's Survival Guide. And it talked about how to navigate the bureaucracy of the graduate department, how you deal with the department chair, how you kind of like negotiate for some research grants so you could spend less time TAing graduate classes and more time on research. And I was like, man, I chose this field because I thought the lion's share of my mental capacity or time could be spent on interesting problems. But then I was confronted head on by the fact that this was a job like any other job. And there was just a lot of stuff that you had to do that was not research. I saw other immigrants in the department. And I kind of imagined my dad. And so they were spending, 20 to 22 hours a day on math in the classes, afterward. All of their free time besides sleeping was spent on the research and the actual study. And I thought to myself, well, am I passionate enough to be able to compete with these people?
And where did the choice come between go and join a quant fund as a mathematician versus actually start a company? And many people think that Kronos Research was your first company, the predecessor to Robinhood. Actually, it was your second company, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I was actually not very employable coming out of undergrad, believe it or not. So I was a math undergrad coming out of Stanford, and I applied to a couple of jobs. One was to be a derivative trader at a Holland-based algorithmic trading firm. The other was I applied to a small startup called Weatherbill that ended up turning into the Climate Corporation. It was funny. The co-founder of that company is now on the All In podcast.
That's right.
So I went on the All In podcast one time, and I was like, "Hey, you remember interviewing me when I was a senior? I didn't get the job." So we had a nice little laugh about that. But math skills were actually not in high demand in the marketplace. Everyone was like, "Can you program? Can you do this?" And I was like, "Well, not super well. I'm a mathematician. I can solve these difficult theoretical problems." But I was not very employable. And this was 2008 during the global financial crisis. So nobody wanted to hire me. I didn't even get an interview at Google. I think math majors are much more employable nowadays, but this was sort of still like early pre-mobile, pre-AI and machine learning. My skills weren't that much in demand, which was a rude awakening for me. I think the initial jump to becoming an entrepreneur, it didn't seem that risky. I wasn't leaving something massive behind. And I actually sometimes think what my life would have been like if I had lots of job prospects and a lot of like super high paying job offers. Sometimes I think about that. Well, if someone's on like an amazing career path and they have a cushy situation, maybe they would have been a great entrepreneur, but the fear of loss, the fear of sacrificing something is keeping them from doing it because they'd be giving up something that's like very comfortable.
So moving on from your first and your second startup, which you did with Beiju, first topic to unpick would be the importance of the courage and the idea, but also that as the company grows, of course, Robinhood was the one that really took off.
Yeah.
There were all these other things, people, hiring, culture, regulators. Can you sort of weigh those two aspects and sort of reflect on those sort of the early motivations, you going into something unknown, but then once that takes off, it takes you to a whole new world of different skills and things you have to do?
I didn't start out intending to be an entrepreneur by any means. I wanted to be a mathematician. I wanted to create new knowledge. And what really got me excited was this idea that if I create something as a mathematician, maybe kids in school would be learning it hundreds of years later, right? If you think about the great mathematicians like Gauss or Riemann, every kid in school learns their product, and their addressable market is hundreds of millions, if not more. And I thought that would be really awesome if you could produce something like that. So when I became an entrepreneur for the first time, and our first venture ultimately was not successful, but I think I discovered an element of that original desire. It was just being an entrepreneur and taking all of my energy and all of my faculties to produce something and working for myself and not really being beholden to anyone other than the customer, that was just a very intoxicating feeling. And I poured my heart and soul into it. I would work basically all hours that I wasn't sleeping, with Beiju. And it was so exhilarating that even though it wasn't successful and we weren't having like any material success really, it was enough for me to say, okay, I'm not going back to school. This is my path. This is what I want to be. That kept going for about a year until I felt the pressure of actually needing to be successful. It's like, I can't ask my parents for money. Everyone's just kind of starting to talk about, whether I made the right decision, friends, family members, like what is he doing with his life? So the second stage was needing to work on something that's commercially successful and generate some revenue. And then we did that with our second company, Kronos, which, when we built it out, it was bootstrapped, got to a few million in revenue. And we saw a path to getting to, tens of millions of revenue. And I'd say the third transition that I made as an entrepreneur was working on something that passed the kind of legacy test for me, meaning that if my life was defined by this business, would I be very, very proud of having brought this into the world? Would I want it to be my legacy or would I not? And then Kronos, which was selling algorithmic trading software to big banks and hedge funds, really didn't do that for me. But Robinhood did. And I think there was lots of challenges that you mentioned, learning how to manage big teams, compliance, and having to build the company, going through the IPO, all of the crises. But I think the most important thing is I was working on something that I was legitimately very proud of. And I think when you're doing that, when it's a mission you buy into and a technology and a product that you really care about, I think you're willing to put up with a lot because you know that at the end of the day, this is like your life's work.
That's interesting because you're showing your growth and how you think about moving
Yeah.
to the next challenge. Where have you found that you've grown most as a leader? Was it through the crises or was it really thinking of the next chapter for the company?
I guess my historical weakness is probably that I like to do a lot of things and I can be rather impatient. I've had to learn this the hard way, but like focusing on things and not rushing them, I actually think comes somewhat unnaturally to me, and I've had to kind of like learn to do that. And building a new product is very much, I think, like building a work of art, right? It's sort of like you have to have the customer in mind, but you're also building it for yourself, and you have to be proud of it. And there's all sorts of trade-offs between like when you listen to feedback or when you don't, when you put it out into the world and when you don't.
I guess it'd be really interesting to hear how influenced you were by external factors.
There's the things that came before, maybe not in your space, but in technology broadly. And we have to look at consumer product launches like the iPhone or iPhone operating system. And to some extent, that dictates what people are doing. And there's also just sort of like a trend of, like a generational trend driven by young people of what they're interested in. But there's also times where you're kind of bucking the trend and you don't want to do what everyone else is doing at the same time. You can kind of do the opposite. And in some cases, that is remembered even more.
Yeah. I mean, you've got two absolutely incredible achievements on the product front. One, obviously, to launch the zero commission brokerage app, which has just been a worldwide success. But secondly, more recently, a credit card.
Yeah.
That seems to have gone incredibly well. And what would be interesting to compare and contrast is really, again, the app 10 years ago, there was a pioneer going to disrupt with little to lose. But when you approached the credit card industry, that is a very saturated market with a lot of extremely smart competitors. And of course, you entered that space as partly an incumbent. Talk a little bit about how your mindset might have changed to go after that new product, or actually have you deployed all your inner strengths and skills and the learnings that had carried you through the last 10 years?
I think even when we launched the first product, commission-free trading, like that was viewed at the time as a saturated market, a lot of large competitors that are well-funded, spending a ton of money on marketing. You remember the E-Trade baby. E-Trade was running Super Bowl ads with a talking baby. There was a lot of skepticism. Can we kind of enter into that space, compete with these companies paying thousands of dollars in customer acquisition? But what we launched ended up being different and unique enough across multiple dimensions to be memorable, and it ended up kind of changing the industry. And I think with the credit card, I think what we did well and what's resonated is we again hit upon multiple things that customers value. One is the economics, 3% cash back across all categories. You can't really beat that in the US credit card market. Two is the digital experience. I mean, for most credit cards, you kind of have the physical thing, and then the online experience of paying for your bills is almost an afterthought, right? You don't really have to use that. And when we really asked ourselves, can we make a first-class digital experience that you'll actually get value from and want to use on a regular basis? And so we introduced virtual cards and family features and really nice expense tracking. And people love those almost as much as the rewards. And then the third is the physical design of the card. And we spent a lot of time meticulously asking ourselves, you might consider it like incredible minutia about the product, but should the card be horizontal or vertical? Should the logo be etched or embossed,
Attention to detail.
Right. How do we distinguish the solid gold from the standard metallic gold? How does the referral mechanism work? I mean, we spent a lot of time on the physical design of the gold, whether it's smooth and reflective or a little bit sort of like a rougher matte texture. We have a lot of great artists in Robinhood. I mean, I consider them artists, and we all felt incredibly proud of this thing. And then, of course, the hard work of actually scaling it up and rolling it out begins.
You are sending a really optimistic message to many entrepreneurs that there are big lines of opportunity in the broader fintech space. You can go and fundamentally improve a massive market that appears to be covered and done.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities. Fintech is a large market. I mean, everyone in the world interacts with money and finances in some way. It's a global market, and lots of things are changing in the world. And I think for some people, even myself, it can be disorienting. I mean, you're seeing huge progress in technology, in artificial intelligence. But the one thing that's going to be the same in 10 years, I don't think money's going away. If anything, investing is going to become even more important.
Thank you for being here today, and look forward to continued friendship and working together.
Yeah, always a pleasure.